She set the table with candles and roses, dressed in silk, and waited only for him to walk in late. Look her in the eye and say, "Marrying you was the worst decision of my life." But what he didn't know was that this was the night she stopped waiting for his love and started becoming unstoppable. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and like the video. It helps us keep sharing these powerful stories. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The city of San Francisco glowed beneath a soft drizzle. Traffic lights flickered on wet streets, and cable cars rolled by with their usual sleepy charm. 33 floors up, in a modern glass apartment with a perfect view of the bay, Melina Hart stood at the dining table, adjusting a white linen napkin for the third time. The table was elegant candlelight danced beside a vase of fresh gardenias. Gold-rimmed plates waited in symmetry, and the salmon she'd cooked hours ago rested gently under foil in the oven. Her dress, a dark green silk that hugged her figure just enough, whispered grace every time she moved. She'd even curled her hair the way Jared used to like it. Soft waves, not too messy. It was their anniversary. 6 years married. Outside the window, the rain tapped gently on the glass. Inside it was too quiet. She glanced at the clock. 8:24 p.m. He was almost 2 hours late. Melina took a small sip of her wine, her lips pressing tightly against the crystal glass. It was the good kind. The one they'd brought back from Napa on their second anniversary. The bottle had dust on it when she pulled it from the cabinet. The elevator dinged. She didn't move. Keys clattered onto the marble counter. "Why is it so dark in here?" Jared's voice called from behind. Not angry. Not curious. Just ... annoyed. "Ambience," Melina replied, without turning. He dropped his leather briefcase to the floor and exhaled sharply. "I'm starving. You could have waited for me." Melina took another sip of wine. "I did." Finally, she turned. Jared had already loosened his tie and was rolling up his sleeves. He didn't notice the candles, didn't notice the food, didn't even look at her dress. He sat down, adjusting his chair. "What's all this? Some celebration?" She met his eyes calmly. "It's our anniversary." His brow furrowed. A beat passed, then a quiet scoff. 6 years of this. Melina's throat tightened, but her expression didn't change. 6 years of marriage. He stabbed his fork into the salmon, the silver scraping against the plate. Right. They ate in silence. Jared devoured the meal like a man who hadn't eaten in days. Melina barely touched her food. She watched the candlelight flicker, her mind far away. Then it came. He leaned back in his chair, swirling the last of his wine, and said it casually. "Right." Too casually. "Marrying you was probably the worst decision of my life." The words dropped like cold metal in the warm room. Melina blinked once. Her heart thudded, but she didn't flinch. Not this time. Instead, she smiled. Not wide, not fake, just enough to be unreadable. Jared squinted at her. "What are you smiling at?" She stood slowly and picked up her plate. "Nothing," she said softly. "Just thinking how freeing honesty can be." He let out a dry laugh. Passive-aggressive as always. She moved to the kitchen. The sponge in her hand trembled slightly as she cleaned the plate. "Unremarkable," he added from the table. "That's the word. You just float around the house with your sketches and yoga and ... whatever this is. You quit your job and expect me to bankroll your hobbies?" Her hands tightened on the sponge. "You insisted I quit?" she said without turning. "You said when your firm relocated, we'd be a team. Promised you'd support my designs when you got promoted." He rolled his eyes. "Grow up, Melina." She dried her hands and finally faced him. "I did," she said quietly. "I grew up the moment I realized I stopped existing in this marriage." Jared shook his head and stood. Save the drama. He walked to the bar and poured another drink. The sound of ice clinking in the glass filled the silence. Melina walked to the bedroom. The carpet felt soft beneath her bare feet, but every step felt heavy with finality. In the corner of her closet, tucked behind a row of old coats and untouched handbags, sat a small suitcase. She pulled it out. Her hands moved calmly, opening drawers and collecting folded sketches. Each drawing felt like a part of her, full of life, full of who she used to be. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Samuel Orion. Your portfolio is stunning. If you're serious, let's talk. Friday, Melina smiled. This time, it reached her eyes. In the hallway, Jared called out, "Are you going somewhere?" He leaned on the bedroom doorway, glass in hand, shirt UNTUCK. And Teta Melina zipped the suitcase and looked at him. "Not tonight," she said. "But soon," he scoffed. "Running away?" "No," she answered, walking toward something. He laughed bitterly. "You'll be back?" She stepped past him, doubtful. "You won't recognize the woman I'm becoming." He stared at her, confused. She looked the same face, same eyes. But something was ... different. She didn't want to win him back. She wasn't waiting for his love. She didn't need it. "You're seeing someone?" he asked, voice sharp. Melina paused at the door, then smiled gently. "No, but I'm finally seeing myself." And then she walked into the quiet hallway, leaving behind a man who never really saw her, hand a life that was never truly hers. Rain tapped gently against the tall windows of the apartment. Outside, San Francisco glowed under streetlights, but inside, Melina's heart stood in soft silence. The night had stretched into morning. She hadn't slept. In the walk-in closet, the small suitcase sat open like a quiet secret. Her movements were careful, slow. She folded clothes with intention, not panic. A few essentials: her sketchbook, the charger she always forgot, and the small silver pendant her mother gave her when she graduated college. She hadn't worn it in years. Jared's voice echoed faintly from the kitchen as he spoke on the phone. His tone was sharp, irritated, complaining about a client who didn't listen. Melina paused and listened not to his words, but to how little space her name had in his life anymore. A fading echo. She zipped the suitcase, set it by the wall, and picked up her phone. There was a message waiting. Samuel Orion. "I've arranged a meeting with the boutique. If you're willing to travel, we'd love to see you. Let's talk Friday." Melina reread the message twice. Her hands shook, but not from fear. It was something else. Something new. Maybe hope. In the kitchen, Jared hung up the call and walked into the living room. He glanced at her suitcase but said nothing. Instead, he turned on the television, flipping through channels. News, finance, sports, nothing that mattered. Melina walked past him and sat on the edge of the sofa. "I'm going to New York," she said softly. He didn't look up. "You've never been." "I know." Finally, he turned to her. "So what's in New York? More yoga retreats? Some pop-up art class?" "A chance," she replied. "To do something real? To do something for me?" He chuckled. "You always talk like you're some starving artist." "I've supported you, Melina." Her gaze didn't waver. "You supported the version of me that stayed quiet." He stood now, clearly annoyed. "Don't do this. This is childish, dramatic." Melina stayed still. "You remember when I got the offer from the design firm in Oakland?" He didn't answer. "I turned it down because you said your job was relocating. You told me we were a team, and I believed you." "You're twisting things," he snapped. "No," she said. "I'm just remembering them clearly now." The room fell into silence again. He looked around as if the apartment might offer a reason for her to stay. But the walls held nothing for her anymore. He sat back down, rubbed his face with his hands, and sighed. "I don't get it." "You have everything." Here Melina looked around too. The polished floors, the expensive furniture, the framed photo from a trip that felt like a lifetime ago. "I have a place here," she said. "Not a life." He leaned back and smirked. "You're not cut out for that world." "New York Design Studios? It'll eat you alive." Melina stood up. "I'd rather be eaten alive than fade away in silence." She walked to the closet, grabbed her coat, and returned to the living room. Her suitcase rolled quietly behind her. Jared stared at it. "You think you'll come back a star?" "What?" She looked at him, and for once her eyes didn't carry sadness, only certainty. "I don't need to be a star," she said. "Just need to shine on my own terms." He stood quickly, almost angry now. "You'll come crawling back." Melina tilted her head slightly. "Maybe, but not to you." The front door opened with a quiet click. Oh, the hallway outside smelled like fresh rain. Her cab was already downstairs. She hadn't told Jared she booked it hours ago. Some decisions don't need permission. As she stepped into the hall, Jared called out, "Are you really doing this?" She didn't turn around, Melina. Still, she kept walking. At the elevator, she pressed the button. The soft hum of the machine coming to life felt like a heartbeat returning. He appeared at the doorway, Ali, leaning against the frame like he was trying to play calm. "You're going to fail. They won't take you seriously." Melina turned to face him. "I know," she said. "You never did either." The elevator opened. She stepped inside. No tears, no drama, just quiet purpose. As the doors closed between them, called her name one more time, but it didn't reach her. The ride down felt long, but in the best way. Like time was giving her a moment to breathe before the next chapter. When the doors slid open on the ground floor, the cab driver looked up from his phone and smiled. "Melina, that's me," she said with a small nod. She climbed into the back seat, her suitcase beside her. As the car pulled away from the curb, she looked up at the glowing apartment windows above. 6 years inside that life. But tonight, she chose something else. Freedom. As the city faded behind her, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Samuel. "Bring the sketch with the white overlay, the one with the stitched neckline. I haven't stopped thinking about it." She smiled to herself and replied, "On my way." The cab turned onto the freeway. Raindrops streaked through window beside her. But this time, the rain didn't feel cold. It felt like the start of something clean, something real. And Melina Hart, who had once been called a mistake, was finally on the road to becoming her own masterpiece. New York City greeted Melina Hart with a cold wind and the loud energy of honking taxis and rushing footsteps. As she stepped out of the airport, her suitcase trailing behind her, she felt it something shifting deep inside. This wasn't just a trip. This was her first real step toward becoming someone she hadn't seen in a long time. Samuel Orion met her outside a small studio in Brooklyn. He looked exactly as she remembered from years ago, always dressed in layers, always smiling like he knew something the world didn't. "You made it," he said, opening the glass door with one hand while balancing coffee in the other. "I almost didn't," Melina admitted, "but I'm glad I did." The studio was nothing like the polished apartment she left behind. The floors were worn, and fabric rolls leaned against every wall. Laughter echoed from the back room where 2 assistants were pinning fabric to a mannequin. Everything smelled like fresh cotton and strong espresso. And yet it felt more like home than her last 6 years ever had. Samuel waved her over to a large table. "Let me see what you brought." Melina unzipped her sketch folder and laid them out, one by one. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her eyes stayed on his face. She was searching for a sign approval, interest, maybe even surprise. Samuel didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, without looking up, he said, "These are better than good." Melina blinked. "Really?" He nodded. "They're honest. Quiet but bold. You've got something rare." A soft laugh escaped her. "My husband used to say they were too simple, boring." Samuel looked at her, his smile fading just a bit. "Then your husband wasn't the right audience." Melina felt something unstick inside her, like a knot loosening. He didn't ask for details, and she didn't offer them. It was enough that he understood. Later that day, Samuel introduced her to Tasha Blaine, director of a boutique fashion show happening the next week. Tasha was sharp, fast-talking, and had a reputation for discovering new designers who had soul in their stitches. Melina stood quietly while Tasha flipped through her sketches. After a few pages, Tasha looked up. "You don't scream in your designs, you whisper. But the message is loud." Melina wasn't sure how to respond, so she nodded. Tasha handed the sketches back and said, "We want 3 pieces for the showcase. Can you have them ready by Friday?" Melina blinked. For days, "You're in or you're out," Tasha said with a smile that wasn't unkind, just real. "I'm in." For the next 4 days, Melina hardly slept. She worked inside the studio with borrowed fabric, borrowed machines, and borrowed courage. Her fingers ached from sewing. Her eyes burned from late nights. But her heart, it felt alive again. Each dress came together like a piece of her story. One had a deep navy base with delicate silver threads sewn like vines climbing up the hem. Another was soft gray, with pearl buttons down the back, each one hand-sewn and chosen with care. The third was her favorite. A simple black gown with an open neckline and a thin white stitch crossing over the chest like a scar. I didn't try to be loud. It just existed with quiet grace. "You stitched your soul into this one," Samuel said as he helped her steam. "The final dress." "I think I did," she whispered, while Melina worked, far away in San Francisco. Jared noticed the silence. The apartment felt colder without her, emptier. He didn't say it out loud, but he checked her social media every night. At first there was nothing, and quiet posts began to appear. A table filled with fabric swatches. A blurry photo of a sewing machine under lamplight. Picture of a coffee cup with a name tag. Melina, designer guest. He didn't like the feeling creeping into his chest. It was unfamiliar. Not jealousy exactly. Something closer to regret. On Friday evening, the boutique show opened in a repurposed greenhouse in Lower Manhattan. Fairy lights twinkled overhead, and soft music played in the background. Guests whispered. Brows raised in interest as Melina's pieces came down the small runway one after another. They didn't shout. They didn't sparkle, but they told a story. A quiet rebellion. A soft refusal to disappear. Samuel stood beside her backstage, his arms crossed proudly. "They get it," he said. "You've arrived." Melina didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the final model as she stepped onto the stage, wearing the black gown with the stitched scar. The audience went still. A moment later they applauded. Not loudly, but with warmth. A quiet storm as the applause faded. Melina looked down. At her hands, they were no longer shaking. They were steady, like her. She wasn't someone's shadow anymore. Not someone's mistake. She was a woman who had bloomed. The evening buzzed with quiet excitement. A converted loft in Brooklyn, now lit with hanging lanterns and soft amber light, had been transformed into a fashion haven. Photographers whispered near the entrance. Stylists darted between racks, and music pulsed low in the background. The boutique show was more than just an event, it was a moment. And at the heart of it stood Melina Hart. She stood backstage, dressed in black slacks and a cream blouse, her hair pulled back in a low knot. Nothing flashy. Just calm, focused, ready. Samuel Orion stood beside her, watching models being fitted for final touches. "They're already talking," he whispered. "Your name is on more than one notepad out there." Melina smiled softly, not because she needed the attention, but because for the first time in her life, it was earned on her own terms. Her 3 dresses hung like stories behind her, stitched from silence, strength, and survival. They weren't made to impress. They were made to speak. As the first model stepped onto the runway, the room hushed. Melina peeked through the curtain. The crowd was larger than she expected. Buyers, critics, and her breath caught Jared. He sat in the third row, alone. His face was unreadable, his eyes locked on the stage. He wore a tailored suit and held the program in both hands. She hadn't invited him, hadn't even told him. But there he was. "Everything okay?" Samuel asked. Melina stepped back from the curtain. "Yes," she said. "Everything's perfect." The show moved like a dream. One by one, her designs came to life under the warm runway lights. Each model walked with quiet confidence, the fabric flowing like poetry. The audience didn't clap loudly after each look. Instead, they listened. They felt. They leaned in. When the final model walked out wearing the black dress with the white stitched scar across the chest, the room fell completely silent. For a moment, even the music faded. It wasn't just a dress, it was a moment of truth. The applause started slow. Then it grew. Not wild. Not forced. Real Melina stepped onto the runway herself, the lights washing over her. She walked out not as someone's wife, not as someone forgotten, but as herself. Her shoulders were straight, her face calm. When she reached the end, she bowed gently, not to please, but to thank. Backstage, congratulations surrounded her. Stylists hugged her. Photographers snapped shots. Tasha Blaine clapped her on the back and said, "You didn't just show a collection, you told a story." Melina thanked everyone, her heart full and her voice steady. Then she turned and saw Jared standing by the curtain. He looked smaller. Somehow, not physically, but something in his posture had changed. The usual sharpness in his expression was gone. "Melina," he said. She nodded once. "You came." He stepped forward. "I didn't expect. You were incredible." She gave him a polite smile. "Thank you." He looked around the room. "I never knew you had all this in you." "You never looked," she replied. "Not unkandly." Jared hesitated. "That night, I didn't mean it, what I said. But you did," she said simply. "And I'm glad." He looked confused. "Glad?" "Yes," she said. "Because if you hadn't said those words, I might still be shrinking myself to fit into a life that was never meant for me." There was a long silence. "I miss you," he said finally. "I miss us." Melina tilted her head. "There's no us, Jared. You ended that." His shoulders dropped. "But can't we just talk? Figure it out?" "You want to rebuild a house after setting fire to its foundation?" she said quietly. "That's not how it works." He looked at her like he was seeing someone new. He was. Samuel appeared beside her, gently placing a soft wrap over her shoulders. "They're calling for you," he said with a warm smile. "After party upstairs." Melina turned back to Jared, not angry. "I just finally understand. You didn't break me. You revealed me." She walked past him, her heels clicking softly on the concrete floor. The after-party was held on the rooftop. Lights strung above created a golden canopy, and the city skyline shimmered in the distance. People laughed, clinked glasses, and whispered her name in admiration. Melina stood in the center of it all. Not loud, not showy, just present. Fully herself, Samuel raised a glass beside her. "You shook the room, Melina. They're calling you the future of quiet couture." Melina sipped her drink and smiled. "I don't want to be anyone's future. I just want to be mine." Across the rooftop, Jared stood alone near the edge, watching. But this time, she didn't feel the need to look back. A few weeks later, a magazine cover featured her name, Melina Hart. From forgotten wife to fashion's quiet revolution, the article called her a visionary. But Melina didn't care for labels. She was just glad to be living on her own terms. One evening, she stood barefoot on her studio balcony. Her phone buzzed, a message from Jared. It simply said, "You looked powerful tonight. I'm proud of you." She stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. No reply. Some chapters end best without a final page. As she turned, the city lights caught her reflection in the glass door. Not the old version, not the woman who waited in silence, but someone new, someone whole. A woman who bloomed and never looked back.